because you don't even know what sex is at that point, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not
Hmm.
even sure what the heck you saw.
How much of our communication problems in a relationship stem from individual upbringing and past experiences versus the actual dynamic of the relationship itself? Most of us are always working on communication with our partner. Do you believe that a lot of that stems from past history or just what's happening in the current dynamic of your relationship today?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks, Josh. I think it's a combination. It's a combination of your upbringing and, understanding all these things that your behaviors that you created, because your brain, everything in your behavior is basically modeled from your parents, and it's all being set up from when you're born until about the age of 7 years old. And everything is just you're copying your parents, right? So all the negative things that they were doing, you're going to be doing. So I think it's a big reflection, unless you start being aware of all these negative things that you took over from your parents. I think the biggest thing you can do in a relationship is to love the other person you're with and show that to your kids, right?
Hmm.
So you set a good example for them, because I think that's the only way they will actually learn to have a good relationship. If you and your partner have a bad relationship, and that's all the kids are seeing, they'll have a shitty relationship as well. It's just we're copying what we've been taught, unless we're starting to be aware of it and we start correcting these behaviors, right?
Hmm. 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 Yeah, no, that makes sense. Roman, how about you? What do you feel about the communication? Is it from the past, or is it something that's inherent just in your current whoever you're with?
No, well, that's kind of a loaded question a little bit too, because I 100% think it's, the environment that makes you. A man is born and then the land makes the man. A man is a product of their environment. But as far as the dynamic in the relationship, what I believe to be true is that the more dominant person in the relationship will create an environment to which to live by, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. As far as the dynamics go, I believe it's up to the person who's dominant to set the standards. Now, if that person's standards were, a product of their environment, which was maybe unhealthy relationships, then they're going to set poor standards, and then that becomes the dynamic of the relationship.
Hmm.
So, kind of rolling it back for a second, I think 1,000% most of us, because look, there's some people being born around the world that are convinced, like during World War II or whatever, they're being programmed from childbirth that this is the enemy. This is, you kill any on sight.
Yeah.
Or this is good and this is bad. And these children become, teenagers, and these teenagers become adults with a certain programming. And now, and because listen, nobody is suicidal. Nobody's born depressed. Nobody just becomes depressed and wants to kill themselves. But think about how strong of an influence and programming there has to be to create a martyr who's willing to kill himself for his country, or to be kind of some kind of suicide bomber. That's a direct product of like programming. So the same way that we see that sort of programming, we see program with relationships, and that stuff is extremely, extremely influential to children. If your father, if you're, let's say you're speculative speaking, let's say you're 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and your father cheats on your mother, and you walk in on him, and maybe he doesn't notice you, and you see this, and then you try talking to your mother about it and telling her, and then she tells you that, because you don't even know what sex is at that point, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not even
Hmm.
sure what the heck you saw. So you're asking your mother genuinely about what was going on. And if your mother tells you, oh, sex will ruin any relationships, or maybe they get into a fight and they get a divorce, now you're growing up with the programming that having sex ruins relationships. Or if you're maybe a little bit more fluid, you might think,
Hmm.
okay, cheating ruins relationships, right? So now you're programmed to think, okay, any person that you ever encounter in your life that's a cheater, you hate them because that's what happened to your parents. Or you might be even scared to have sex, or you might have some kind of sexual, what's the word, anxiety, like performance anxiety when it comes to sex, because of what you've experienced as a child. So 1,000% you're a
Hmm.
product of your environment. And when it comes down to, communication, I think that first of all, I don't believe our generation knows how to communicate effectively. I think
Mhm.
that this whole like concept of ghosting and being afraid to kind of make a commitment, it grinds the shit out of my gears, right? Because somebody might say, yeah, I might want to hang out on Friday, and then all of a sudden they don't respond to you on Friday. That's because they don't want to get into a commitment. We're so weak as a society that we're afraid to make commitments to go out with somebody because, oh, but what if this other guy messages me and he's more fun to hang out with, right? It's
Yeah.
like, man, dance with the one that you brought to prom. You know what I mean? Don't just change dates in the middle of the dance.
Yeah, and just to add to it, I think that, that's spot on, Roman. And I think that, once you have this set of beliefs that is not, it's negative, it's not supporting you, you actually send out this energy or somehow attract the people that actually will prove you right, right? So
Mhm.
if you have like this guy always going to be cheating on me or whatever, you will attract that person and you'll be like, yes, I knew it. Like, look, he did it again or whatever, right? Another guy that like is like that. So I
For
think
sure.
that subconsciously you're like looking for that person that's going to prove you right because we always want to be right.
For
Yeah.
sure.
No. Yeah.
And all the feedback I can give is first of all personal opinions and personal experiences. So I'm only speaking of what I've lived through, and I can tell you right now that with my parents there was definitely a lack of communication, and or just poor communication in general. And growing up, I saw that, and I suppose me being an insightful kid, I realized how much that can deteriorate a relationship. Now, unlike another child in that situation might look at that and think, okay, that's how it should be, that's normal, and then duplicate that behavior. I watched that and I said, okay, well, my mom's clearly upset because my dad's not listening, or my dad says this, but he really means this. And what that taught me and programmed me over the years, again, being an insightful kid, even when I was 5 or 6 years old,
Mhm.
I grew up to almost act opposite. I always made sure that my relationships and my partner understood what I meant. They understood what was important to me. Going through something like rehabilitation, and I went to a rehab facility when I was 19, and being taught like the 5 love languages and things like that. And I understood that I need to communicate that to my partner or my spouse because those things are important to me. And I realized what poor communication can do to a relationship. So I figured, okay, let's see what really good communication can do to a relationship, which is kind of like the rules that I've been running.
Mhm.
And that's why,
Mhm.
like I always, like my friend always used to say, he said, talk it to death, just talk it all out. It's not about not going to bed angry necessarily, but it's about talking it out. Don't just
Mhm.
walk away and scuff it off. Just explain to the partner of maybe why you're upset or why that was something that you weren't agreeing with or something that might have bugged you, and overcome the fear of them judging you. I think that's exactly what people don't do. They're worried maybe in early stages of the relationship to speak up because they're worried of losing that person or being judged. Well, newsflash, that person's probably not right for you. So
Mhm.
find somebody who you can share those things with, right? Find somebody who you can explain to them exactly how you feel, and regardless of the judgment, you're able to talk it out and pave a path forward rather than bottling these emotions up. And that's how you get men beating their wives, or women committing suicide because they feel oppressed by their men, and all this crazy shit that happens, right?
Yeah. No, good. That's good feedback.
If
Okay.
you're interested in exploring more topics like today's or have suggestions for future discussions, we'd love to hear from you. So please leave a comment below. To find out where you stand in the 3 core areas of your life, health, wealth, and relationships, take our free assessment at liferocketuniversity.com. We will see you next time at the Life Rocket University Studios.